Well, okay then. We say we dive in with another reading from Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. That's right. But first, we like to set the mood, getting the mood right, getting the lights off, get that fire crackling. Yeah, boom. A little bit of an orange and red background for the fire crackling. That's what that means. And a little bit of D harp. That's right. So we got tonight. I'm getting that D band. Where is she? I suppose that's enough. All right. Hey, tonight we're going to deal with a couple shorties in a succession. A lot of times I don't want to read these by themselves because like I said, they're shorties. So we got to get in and read them in succession as they turn up. And the first would be the Water Sprite. So let's get going with the Water Sprite. A little brother and sister were one day playing together by the side of a well, and not being careful, they both fell in. Under the water they found a fairy, who said to them, "Now I have caught you, and I intend you to work for me." So she carried them both away, and when they arrived at her home, she set the maiden to spin hard, tangled flax, and gave her a cask full of holes to fill with water. And she sent the boy to the wood with a blunt axe, and told him to cut wood for her fire. The children became at last so impatient with this treatment that they waited till one Sunday when the fairy was at church, and ran away. But the church was close by, and as they were flying away like two birds, she espied them, and went after them with great strides. The children saw her coming in the distance, and the maiden threw behind her a great brush, which instantly became a mountain covered with prickly points, over which the fairy had the greatest trouble to climb. But the children saw that she had managed to get over, and was coming near. The boy then threw a comb behind him, which became a mountain of combs, with hundreds of teeth sticking up. But the fairy knew how to hold fast on this, and soon clambered over it. The maiden next threw a looking glass behind her, which became a mountain also, and was so slippery that it was impossible to get over it. Then the fairy thought, "I will go home and fetch my axe, and break through the looking glass." But when she came back and had broken through the looking glass, the children had been for a long time too far away for her to overtake them. So she was obliged to sink back into the well. And that has been the Water Sprite. Like I said, a little shorty. And let's move on to the Sea-Hare. There was once upon a time a princess who, high under the battlements of her castle, had an apartment with 12 windows, which looked out in every possible direction. And when she climbed up to it and looked around her, she could inspect her whole kingdom. When she looked out at first, her sight was more keen than that of any other human being. From the second she could see still better, from the third more distinctly still, and so went on until the 12th, from which she saw everything above the earth and under the earth, and nothing at all could be kept secret from her. Moreover, as she was haughty, and would be subject to no one, but wished to keep the dominion for herself alone, she caused it to be proclaimed that no one should ever be her husband who could not conceal himself from her so effectually, that it should be quite impossible for her to find him. He who tried this, however, was so discovered by her, and was to have his head struck off, and stuck on a post. 97 posts with heads of dead men were already standing before the castle, and no one had come forward for a long time. The princess was delighted and thought to herself, "Now I shall be free as long as I live." Then 3 brothers appeared before her and announced to her that they were desirous of trying their luck. The eldest believed he would be quite safe if he crept into a lime pit, but she saw him from the first window, made him come out, and had his head cut off. The second crept into the cellar of the palace, but she perceived him from the first window, and his fate was sealed. His head was placed on the 99th post. Then the youngest came to her and entreated her to give him a day for consideration, and also to be gracious as to overlook it if she should happen to discover him twice. But if he failed a third time, he would look on his life as over. As he was so handsome and begged so earnestly, she said, "Yes, I will grant thee that, but thou wilt not succeed." Next day he meditated for a long time how he should hide himself, but all in vain. Then he seized his gun and went out hunting. He saw a raven, took good aim at him, and just as he was going to fire, when the bird cried, "Don't shoot! I will make it worth thy while not to kill me." He put his gun down, went on, and came to a lake, where he surprised a large fish which had come up from the depths below the surface of the water. When he had aimed at it, the fish cried, "Don't shoot! I will make it worth thy while." He allowed it to dive down again, went onwards, and met a fox which was lame. He fired and missed it, and the fox cried, "You had much better come here and draw the thorn out of my foot for me." He did this, but then wanted to kill the fox and skin it. The fox said, "Stop, and I will make it worth your while." The youth let him go, and then it was evening, and he returned home. Next day he was to hide himself, but however much he puzzled his brains over it, he did not know where. He went into the forest to the raven and says, "I let thee live on, so now tell me where I am to hide myself, so that the king's daughter shall not see me." The raven hung his head and thought it over a long time, and at length he croaked, "I have it." He fetched an egg out of his nest and cut it in 2 parts, and shut the youth inside it, and then made it whole again and seated himself on it. And when the king's daughter went to the window, she could not discover him, nor could she from the others, and she began to be uneasy. But from the 11th she saw him, and she ordered the raven to be shot, and the egg to be brought and broken, and the youth was forced to come out. She said, "For once thou art excused, but if thou dost not do better than this, thou art lost." The next day he went to the lake, and he called the fish to him and says, "I suffered thee to live. Now tell me where to hide myself, so that the king's daughter may not see me." The fish thought a while, and at last cried, "I have it. I will shut thee up in my stomach." He swallowed him and went down to the bottom of the lake. And the king's daughter looked through her windows, and even from the 11th did not see him, and was alarmed. But at length from the 12th she saw him. She ordered the fish to be caught and killed. Then the youth appeared. Everyone can imagine what a state of mind he was in. She said, "Twice thou art forgiven, but be sure that thy head will be on the 100th post." On the last day he went with a heavy heart into the country and met the fox. "Thou knowest how to find all kinds of hiding places," said he. "I let thee live, and now advise me where I shall hide myself, so that the king's daughter shall not discover me." "That's a hard task," answered the fox, looking very thoughtful. At length he cried, "I have it," and went with him to a spring, dipped himself in it, and came out as a stall keeper in the market, and a dealer in animals. The youth had to dip himself in the water also, and was changed into a small Sea-Hare. The merchant went to the town and showed the pretty little animal, and many persons gathered to see it. At length the king's daughter came likewise, and as she liked it very much, she bought it, and gave the merchant a good deal of money for it. Before he gave it over to her, he said, "When the king's daughter goes to the window, creep quickly under the braids of her hair." And now the time arrived when she was to search for him. She went to the window after another in turn. From the first to the 11th, she did not see him. And when she did not see him from the 12th either, she was full of anxiety and anger, and shut down to deliver such violence that the glass in every window shivered into 1,000 pieces, and the whole castle shook. She went back and felt the Sea-Hare beneath her braids of her hair, and then she seized it and threw it on the ground, exclaiming, "Away with thee! Get out of my sight!" And it ran to the merchant, and both of them hurried to the spring, whereupon they plunged and received back their true forms. The youth thanked the fox and said, "The raven and the fish are idiots compared to me. Thou knowest the right tune to play, and there is no deceiving that." The youth went straight to the palace, and the princess was already expecting him, and accompanied herself to her destiny. The wedding was solemnized, and now he was king and lord of all the kingdom, and he never told her where he had concealed himself for the 3rd time, and who had helped him. So she believed that he had done everything by his own skill, and she had a great respect for him, and she thought to herself, "He is able to do more than I." All right, and let's read one more shorty, somewhat short anyhow. The Pink. There was once a queen who had not been blessed with children, and as she walked to her garden, she prayed every morning that a son or a daughter might be given her. One day an angel came and said to her, "Be content, you shall have a son, and he shall be endowed with the power of wishing, so that whatsoever he wishes for shall be granted to him." She hurried to the king and told him the joyful news, and when time came a son was born to them, and they were filled with delight. Every morning the queen used to take her little son into the gardens where the wild animals were kept, to wash him in a clear, sparkling fountain. It happened one day when the child was a little older, that as she sat with him on her lap, she fell asleep, and the old cook, who knew that the child had the power of wishing, came by and stole the infant. He also killed a chicken and dropped some of its blood on the queen's garments. And he took the child away to a secret place where he placed it out to be nursed. And then he ran back to the king and accused the queen of having allowed her child to be carried off by a wild animal. And when the king saw the blood on the queen's garments, he believed the story and was overwhelmed with anger. He caused a high tower to be built in which neither the sun nor the moon could penetrate. And then he ordered his wife to be shut up in it, and the door walled up. She was to stay there for 7 years without eating or drinking, so as to gradually pine away. But 2 angels from heaven in the shape of white doves came to her, bringing food twice a day till the 7 years were ended. But the cook thought, if the child really has the power of the wishing, and I stay here, I might easily fall into disgrace. So he left the palace and went to the boy, who was old enough to talk now, and said to him, "Wish for a beautiful castle with a garden, and everything belonging to it." Hardly had the words passed the boy's lips that all he had asked for was there. And after a time the cook said, "It is not good for you to be so much alone. Wish for a beautiful maiden to be your companion." The prince uttered the wish, and immediately a maiden stood before them, more beautiful than any painter could paint. And so they grew very fond of each other, and played together while the cook went out hunting like any grand gentleman. But the idea came to him one day that the prince might wish to go to his father some time, and he would thereby be placed in a very awkward position. So he took the maiden aside, and he said to her, "Tonight, when the boy is asleep, go and drive this knife into his heart. And then bring me his heart and his tongue. And if you fail to do it, you will lose your own life." Then he went away, but when the next day came, the maiden had not yet obeyed his command, and she said, "Why should I shed his innocent blood when he has never done any harm to a creature in his life?" And then the cook said, if you do not obey me, you will lose your own life. And when he had gone away, she ordered a young head to be brought and killed. And then she cut out its heart and its tongue and put them on a dish. And when she saw the old man coming, she said to the boy, get into bed and cover yourself right over. The old scoundrel came in and said, where the tongue and the heart of the boy? And the maiden gave him the dish, but the prince threw off the covers and said, you old sinner, why did you want to kill me? Now bear your sentence. You shall be turned into a black poodle with gold chain round your neck, and you shall be made to eat live coals, so that the flames of fire may come out of your mouth. And as he said the words, the old man was changed into a black poodle with a gold chain round his neck. And the scullions brought out live coals, which he had to eat till flames poured out of his mouth. The prince stayed on at the castle for a time, thinking of his mother and wondering if she was still alive. And at last he said to the maiden, I'm going into my own country, and I think if you like you can go with me, and I will take you. And she answered, alas, it is so far off, and what should I do in a strange country where I know no one? As she did not wish to go, and that they could not bear to be parted, he changed her into a beautiful pink, which he could take with him. And then he set out on his journey, and the poodle was made to run alongside till the prince reached his own country. Arriving there, he went straight to the tower where his mother was imprisoned. And as the tower was so high, he wished for a ladder to reach the top. Then he climbed up, looked in, and cried, dearest mother, lady queen, are you still alive? She, thinking it was angels who brought her food come back, said, I've just eaten. I do not wish anything more. And then he says, I am your own dear son, whom the wild animals were supposed to have devoured. But I am still alive, and I shall come and rescue you. Then he got down and went to his father, and he had himself announced as a strange huntsman, anxious to take service with the king, who said, yes, if you are skilled in game preserving and can procure plenty of venison, I will engage you. But there has never before been any game in this whole district. The huntsman promised to procure as much game as the king could possibly require for the royal table. Then he called the whole hunt together and ordered them all into the forest with him. He caused a great circle to be enclosed with only one outlet. Then he took his place in the middle and began to wish as hard as he could. Immediately 200 head of game came rushing into the enclosure. Then the huntsman had to shoot, and then they were piled on to 60 county wagons and driven home to the king. So for once he was able to load his board with game, and after having had none for many years. The king was much pleased and commanded his whole court to a banquet the following day. And when they were all ashamed, he said to the huntsman, you shall sit by me as you are so clever. He answered, my lord and king, may it please your majesty, I am only a poor huntsman. The king, however, insisted and says, I command you to sit by me. As he sat there, his thoughts wandered to his dear mother, and he wished one of the courtiers would speak of her. Hardly had he wished it than the Lord High Marshal said, your majesty, we are rejoicing here. How fares it with her majesty the queen? Is she alive in the tower, or has she perished? But the king answered, she allowed my beloved son to be devoured by wild animals, and I do not wish to hear anything about her. Then the huntsman stood up and said, gracious father, she is still alive, and I am her son. He was not devoured by wild animals. He was taken away by a scoundrel of a cook. He stole me while my mother was asleep, and sprinkled her garments with blood of a chicken. Then he brought up the black poodle with a golden chain and said, this is the villain. I ordered some live coals to be brought, which he made the dog eat and sit inside of all the people till flames poured out of his mouth. Then he asked the king if he would like to see the cook in his true shape, and wished him back, and there he stood in his white apron with his knife at his side. The king was furious when he saw him and ordered him to be thrown into the deepest dungeon. Then the huntsman said further, "My father, would you like to see the maiden who so tenderly saved my life when she was ordered to kill me? Although by doing so she may have lost her own life?" The king answered, "Yes, I will gladly see her." Then his son said, "Gracious father, I will show her to you, first in the guise of a beautiful flower." He put his hand in his pocket, he brought out the pink, and it was a finer one than the king had ever seen before. And then his son said to him, "Now I will show her in her true form." In a moment after his wish was uttered, she stood before them in all her beauty, which was greater than any artist could paint. The king sent ladies and gentlemen in waiting to the tower to bring the queen back to his royal table. But when they reached the tower, they found that she could no longer eat or drink. And she said, "The merciful God who has preserved my life so long will soon release me now." 3 days after she died, at her burial, the 2 white doves, which had brought her food during her captivity, followed and hovered over her grave. The old king caused the wicked cook to be torn into 4 quarters, but his own heart was filled with grief and remorse, and he died soon after. His son married the beautiful maiden he had brought home with him as a flower, and for all I know, they may still be living. And that has been the Pink and the Sea-Hare and the Sea Fairy or something like that. I don't recall. From a Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. If you were curious, just check the title. You know what I'm saying. Anyway, let's take us out. Oh, before I do that, let's just say I got an affiliate link for this down in the description. So if you mind supporting the channel, do your shopping through there, or pick you up a copy. That's right. In the event, I hope you enjoyed yourself. And let's take us out there. All right there. Kisses to the missus and a tip of my cap to your old cat. You come on back now, you hear? You understand? You better. I hope you do. Take care now.